Hello. If you would like to interrupt repetition compulsion, then you will need to address your perfectionism, because perfectionism is a denial of learning. It's the artificial imposition of the expectation that you should have done it flawlessly the first time. If you can't allow yourself to be messy in your spiritual growth, then your reenactments will move underground and you will act them out unconsciously. This is how you end up dating the same type of person over and over again who abandons you just like your father did or whatnot. But perfectionism is not such an easy habit to break when it was a survival mechanism that saved your life and is closely tied to feelings of safety and control. When you're trying to dismantle conditioning that lives that close to the core, I like to recommend ritual. Ritual is an accelerator. It puts you in the driver's seat, and it attracts the support of the universe because the spirits like to reward your courage when you are assigning yourself as master of ceremonies within your own life. So I'd like to give a personal example of how I used ritual recently in regards to perfectionism. I'm traveling right now. I'm in Bali. And the other day I went into a restaurant to eat, but there was a mishap about payment. I didn't know that they only accepted cash. I gave some money to one person, but the person who was preparing the food didn't know that. And so we ended up at an impasse of communication because of the language barrier, and were unable to do the math on what had occurred. So the food was sitting there, it had been prepared, but I couldn't eat it because I couldn't pay for it. It had the symbolism of a dream. It was like that Greek myth of Tantalus. So in the course of this, I became flustered. And there's nothing that will humble me so quickly as when I express impatience in public. I have very low tolerance for myself about that, especially if I'm a customer or a tourist. So upon leaving, I ended up feeling angry with myself. Now, the following day, I was feeling insecure about 3 other things unrelated to the restaurant, what I would call big picture items related to worthiness. And there was a full moon and I was ovulating, so I decided to get into some ritual. But instead of doing that in my Airbnb, I conducted what I would call a walking ritual, meaning ceremony that is performed within the context of the mundane. I chose to go back to the restaurant and to consciously reenact what had happened. But in replaying the scene, I created a couple of tweaks, bringing enough money, obviously, and I brought enough money to pay for the food from the previous day because I assumed that they had to throw that out. Now, upon entering the restaurant, I did have to deal with some embarrassment because there was some conversation amongst the staff in Indonesian about my return. They recognized me from the confusion of the previous day. And I don't think it was anything negative, but I felt that shame rise up in my chest and my throat. This was actually the most important part of the ritual because I practiced being present with myself and these other lovely human beings to complete the transaction rather than defaulting into impatience or self-criticism. They would not accept my money for the food from the previous day. They were very sweet with me about it, and it was a warm exchange. I sat down and ate my food. It was totally delicious. I left the money that I had brought for the previous day's food as a tip. And before I left, I took a napkin and drew a picture of a violin and then tore that up. That has significance for me because I played violin for a few decades and loved to torture myself about how I wasn't good enough at it. So it has that symbolism. Now, upon leaving the restaurant, I felt a lot of relief and freedom around the 3 big picture items that had been troubling me earlier in the day. So this is how ritual can be so powerful. I'm very passionate about ritual design, and I teach it to my coaching clients. For me personally, conventional approaches for anxiety, such as medication, have not worked very well. So it's been critical for me to get creative. Anxiety is typically something new that's trying to break into conscious awareness. Seekers deal with it a lot because you go through a lot of growth. And the pace of the lessons is quickening right now. You're not imagining that. So ritual can be a good substitute for perfectionism because it is a refined tool. Perfectionism was useful in the past, but it is a blunt tool and is not adequate for the level of complexity that you are moving into now. I hope this helps.